So it's a pleasure today to invite all the way from Wingham, Ontario, Doug Kuyvenhoven. Doug.
All right, it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me up and for that delicious meal too. As Ron said, my name is Doug Kuyvenhoven. A little background on me quickly. Married for 33 years, 2 adult married children. I'm from Wingham, Ontario. That's 2 hours to the west of here. And it's a small town, population 3,000. We have 2 traffic lights. And so somebody asked me why Wingham, but, well, that's another whole story. So my dad actually started a business back in 71. We'll get to that. Question here, how many of you are currently in business, owners or managers in business? All right. And how many are retired from business? Any retirees in business? A couple of here. Good, okay. And any pastors in the crowd here? There we go. Martin. Ron asked me to talk about my life before Christ, how I met Christ, and my life after Christ. Now, I'd like to focus my testimony talk on the transformation that's taken place for me in business actually in the last 10 years. But I'll give you a brief outline of my life before Christ, meeting Christ, and then focus on the business life after meeting Christ. In telling my testimony, I want to make sure that God gets the glory. Many days, my morning prayer includes these words: Lord, may I be your humble, grateful, faithful servant. I don't want to come across in my testimony as some self-important, self-made business guy. Anything that has gone well for me in business is because of God, not because of any special talent or intelligence on my part. I view myself as a steward of God's resources. It's all His, none of it's mine. So here goes. I was born in Oakville in 1959, Dutch immigrant parents, youngest of 4 children. My dad moved our family from Mississauga to Wingham in 1971 to start Royal Homes Limited. You might be familiar with Royal because we have a location there in Innisfil on 400, just south of town, design and sales center. From the time I was 12 years old, I worked at Royal, after school, weekends, summers, and it's the only place I really did work. Around 79, when I was 19 years old, I started working full-time in the business. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Royal Homes, we manufacture our homes inside of a factory and then ship them to the job site in fully assembled 3-dimensional modules. Using a crane, we set the modules onto the foundation, add a garage and a porch, complete the brick and siding, and presto, finished homes. The business grew like crazy in the 80s. Our peak year was in 1988. All right. Our peak year was 1988. We built 600 homes in 1 year. We were cranking a house off the assembly line every hour and 45 minutes. That year, we opened a second plant in Peterborough. So my little switch here, my parents were and are Christ followers. I grew up going to church twice every Sunday. I didn't doubt the existence of God, and aside from straying a bit in my teen years, I lived a pretty clean life. Stayed between the lines fairly well. I watched my brother make all the mistakes and thought, better not try that. But the thing was, it was mostly up here. It was in my head, right? Hadn't really gotten down to here. So back to the business thing. In 1988, in our busiest time at Royal, I experienced job burnout. At 29 years old, I just crashed. I had to step back completely from the business. It was a humbling experience. I went from general manager to making puzzles in the corner living room. But God was slowing me down and getting my attention. I think, so that was really an important step in that. And a little while after that, I came face to face with John 3, verse 3, where Jesus says to Nicodemus, I assure you, unless you're born again, you can never see the kingdom of God. And right wrestle with that verse. Other references, I looked at my concordance for born again. What's all this thing about born again? The denomination I grew up in, we didn't really talk about being born again. And so, this was Jesus' words right in red letter ink in my Bible. So a bit of struggle with that, praying for a while, and I experienced what Jesus explained to Nicodemus and discovered the shift of the head to the heart, religion to relationship. And so, it was wild. The world went from black and white to color. It was just a phenomenal change. If you have not experienced that in your life yet, I encourage you to dig in your Bible and look that up and pray about that and struggle with it. And God will answer those prayers. So I experienced an incredible joy and peace of having a relationship with Christ, and to know for certain that my name was written in the book of life. It was in permanent ink. I didn't have to worry about getting rubbed out. That was a done deal. Back to business. It took about a year for me to fully recover from my burnout. And in 1989, at 30 years old, I felt God calling me to stay in the business. And my dad had some health problems, and he was looking to sell the business or doing something. And God led me to a Christian partner and a guy by the name of Peter Benema, and we entered into an agreement to purchase the business with the bank from my father. Peter and I are still in business in Royal, and to this day. Actually, I've been in business with him longer than I was with my dad, and he is the company president. In 1989, so we just bought this business. We had a second plant that we'd opened up in Peterborough. For those of you who know, in 1989, the housing market just went off the edge of a cliff. It just fell. And it didn't take long. We could see it happening. We struggled hard, but within 4 or 5 years, we were technically insolvent. Bank on our door. The value of that plant in Peterborough, it's worth nothing. It's a liability to you now. And we'd like you to pay your loans back. And so, obviously not possible. And so, it turned out they were faced with losing a ton of money on us if they did pull the rug. So they really didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. Looked at us, figured these guys aren't driving Jaguars or flying jets. They're pretty down to earth. I was driving a beat-up Toyota with a couple 100,000 pounders on it. And so they decided to let us work it through. And we learned the hard way the proverb that says the borrower is servant to the lender. And it's made us into pretty conservative business people from that. Peter and I basically spent the next 10 years working for the bank. These were tough character building years. By the grace of God, we finally turned a profit in the late 90s. And a few years after that, again, just total miracle, we paid the bank off. Every nickel that we had loaned from them, we paid back. And then they said, go find a new bank. CIBC went to the TD. I knew for certain that the business was God's. There was no doubt about that in my mind anymore. Not mine, because it was only by God's grace that we got through the 90s. Back in 2011, we celebrated being in business for 40 years, and we're pretty grateful and amazed at that milestone. As you can see, I've been in business all my life, and there are lots of stories I can tell you about my years at Royal, but the story I want to communicate to you this afternoon is not about Royal. It's a story about what God has been doing in the second half of my life and the integration of work and faith and church. There's no spiritual divide here. Us guys especially, we tend to compartmentalize, break those compartmentalized compartments apart. Around 2001, I was feeling unsettled at Royal. I was 42 years old at the time, but I'd already been in the business for 30 years. I was feeling a call to spend more time serving the local church and parachurch ministries. You're in a partner business like that, you're cranking in 50, 60 hours, right? And so I didn't feel it was fair, so I said to my partner, I want to step back from this and take a diversion here. And so Peter and I talked things over. We reshuffled my responsibilities to others in the company, and I stopped being an employee at Royal. My ownership position in the company didn't change, but I was no longer involved in day-to-day operations. Except one guy, the computer programmer guy, that wouldn't let me get rid of him. I still have that. That's okay, though. So one employee at the company reports to me, that's it. So I basically stepped away from being a businessman and got heavily involved in serving the church, Youth for Christ, and some other parachurch organizations. 7 years later or so, in 2008, sensing God's leading, I purchased an old rundown Beaver lumber property in Wingham that was being operated as a video store and arcade. A real gem of property. Anyway, only God. So, sensing leading, the purchase was done in partnership with Gary. That was the fellow you saw on one slide there briefly. Another member in the church that I attended. We created a business partnership and named it Manna Investments Heaven. We dedicated the property to be a place of help, hope, and healing. And so we turned the old, there was an arcade, we turned it into a youth center for drop-in for Youth for Christ. We created space in the back of the building for the local food bank, and then later added space for CARS, which stands for Christian Automotive Repair Service. And these are Christian volunteers that come in and do vehicle repairs for needy households. Labor's free, we just pay for the parts. Later we created a space for caring for the heart, a Christian counseling service. Gary and I wanted to provide extremely low rent for our nonprofit tenants, so that their resources could go directly to the ministry of work rather than spending it on raising money to pay rent. But of course we needed a source of revenue to cover property taxes, utilities, snow removal, and building repairs, that kind of stuff. We're in business, he was an accountant. It was God's money. We weren't worried about getting a return on our investment, but we didn't want to be sinking money into this thing all the time. So, back of a napkin, we made a little business plan and said, why don't we convert the warehouse into self-storage? And so, we started building self-storage units inside the old warehouse, and the lumber shed in the back converted into storage units. And every time we built a bunch of units, God would fill them. We'd build some more, God would fill them. And so, we entered into business partnership without a profit motive. Our objective was simply that the property would be self-sustaining, but God not only brought that vision into being, He also blessed us financially. We consistently experienced 90 to 100% occupancy and in self-storage, and we're actually making a pretty decent ROI on the deal right now. I'll just show you the slides. So that's what we started with. There's Gary, and there was the old arcade, and there's the youth center transformed in that place. That's the food bank in the back, and there's the CARS ministry garage, and there's self-storage units down the side and on the back, and that's the sign at the front of the different ministries and things going on there. So in 2010 then, a couple years later after starting this little venture, I ran into a fellow, guy I had run across paths with him, by the name of Dirk Matt, and he was a Christian businessman, and he invited me to hear this fellow by the name of Ed Silvoso speak in Mississauga. I never knew who Ed Silvoso was, and ended up at the front table sitting right with him during the conference. And after listening to Ed, I read one of the books that he'd written called Anointed for Business. This book right here, Anointed for Business. And Anointed for Business, How to Use Your Influence in the Marketplace to Change the World. Now, listening to Ed, reading Anointed for Business, sparked something deep inside me. It was inspiring to see business as my pulpit for marketplace ministry. Listening to Ed, in my years at Royal, I'd operated as a Christian in business, operating my business with Christian values, using the profits to support Christian organization, but never with the vision that my business was my pulpit, and that I was a marketplace minister, or that God could use me to transform the marketplace I was operating in. When I stopped and added up, the 100 employees at Royal, their families, our suppliers, our customers, it didn't take long to come up with like 500 people that were within the sphere of influence that God had given me, and as a pastor to the marketplace. And that was like 5 times the size of the church I attended Sunday morning. So it really got me and said, wow, this is really something else. And with the book, there's different ideas and stuff like that. Peter and I talked about things, and we agreed to hire a chaplain for our company. We never had a chaplain, but it's like, hey, there's all these employees. They're going through all kinds of crap. They have the same issues or worse, and so let's have a chaplain to care for them. So we got this ex-Pentecostal pastor, a fellow by the name of Stuart Deller, and he's still coming there. He comes one day a week, and his job is just go out there and connect with the guys and the ladies on the floor, and have conversations, and anybody's allowed to take time off the floor to meet with him. He does hospital visits and all that kind of thing, right? So, it's a cost to the company. But a couple years ago, we had a union negotiation, and it was the first one that it just got voted in. Like, the guys accepted it and voted through, right? And I meet with Stuart, every couple of months. We have a coffee together and pray together. And I said, Stuart, I think maybe you had something to do with this, right? With the fact that we're showing care for our employees. You're not just there to work. We care about their lives. Anyway, I better keep moving along here. Prior to reading Line for Business, I was not looking for business growth. Why bother? But now, I was learning and experiencing greater purpose for business. Through business, God could use me to transform the marketplace, to bring God's presence into the spheres of influence that He was giving me. I started having deeper conversations with self-storage customers, right? Because I wasn't really at Royal anymore. I was at William Self-Storage. That's where I was hanging my hat. And so customers would come in, and some of them would be from some pretty messy situations, and they'd say, like, how's it going? Really? And before long, the Kleenex box might be coming out, and before long, we'd be praying together. And when you start seeing yourself as a pastor in the marketplace, and God's sending people to you within the sphere of influence, it's like, wow, that's a whole different way of looking at business. So God was moving me to get personally involved in our community. I joined the local BIA Business Association and volunteered to help with different initiatives around town, something I previously would just ignore. I'm too busy between business and church. I don't have the extra time, do I? But now it was a calling to get involved, to bring Christ's presence into those places. In 2012, God opened the door to form a partnership with another Christian fellow by the name of Joe Courtney to purchase a self-storage facility in a neighboring town called Listowel. He harassed me for like a year. I'm too busy, Joe. And so finally I said, look, you run it, I'll help fund it, and we could do this thing. So we put it together, and we started self-storage. People ask me, how'd you get into self-storage, Doug? I tell you, I fell into it, or God just knocked me into it, because that was just simply a way to generate revenue to pay for the overheads in Wingham. And so we went into Listowel, and God blessed that business. We started with 60% occupancy. Within a year, we were hitting 90% occupancy. He opened that door. After I attended a Transform Our World conference in Hawaii in 2011, Joe and I committed to donating 10% of our profits from each facility to the community, to kingdom advancement in the community where our self-storage facilities were. We had one in Harrison as well then, so Harrison, Listowel, and Wingham. And we were supporting the Youth Christ Centers. We were donating to those. It isn't about the profits only, though. It's about being involved in the marketplace, it's about praying for the marketplace that you're in, and that. So God then gave me a vision to build a network of self-storage facilities, kingdom-focused businesses that are committed to marketplace ministry. And then God opened the doors in subsequent years. I didn't go looking for it. It just kind of came to me to purchase a self-storage facility in Teeswater, and then a couple years later in Walkerton. And just last month, like 13 days ago, we closed the deal in Kincardine. I never expected to be in Kincardine. And these are through partnerships with Christian business guys. And so I'll just show you the slides there then. So there's Wingham Super Storage. Joe got the idea of super storage, and so okay, we'll call it super storage. And there's Listowel, and Harrison, and Teeswater, and Walkerton, and Kincardine. So that's just a little side thing, but again, with the vision of what that business has a deeper purpose and gets us into spheres of influence and allows us to bring the gospel into these different communities, that really gives a whole different spin and a real much deeper purpose in business. There's one more thing I want to leave with you, and that's with those of you that are maybe in your 50s and 60s. This is a challenge for you. Have you thought about mentoring the next generation of Christian business leaders? About 2 years ago, God sent a young newlywed couple from Prince Edward Island to Wingham, Ontario. And they landed in our church. And my wife and I connected with them, invited them for lunch, and they had come to care for their aging grandfather on his farm in a little community close to Wingham. And I helped Alistair, is his name, find a job. That's Alistair right there, by the way. And I helped Alistair find a job. But a little while later he came and he says, Doug, I really been thinking about starting my own business. I'd like to start my own business. Well, he had equity of 0, so that was going to be a little tough. And so I said, hey, look, why don't you join me? The self-storage thing's growing pretty good. I will mentor you in business and in Christian in business and pour myself into helping you. And eventually, hopefully, you'll get on. We'll get you set up and we'll get you started and have your own self-storage facility. So he joined with me. And I'll tell you, this relationship's been a delight. I'm pouring my business Christian experience into Alistair, and he's like a Joseph to me. Everything the guy touches is just, people love him, his customers love him. We get together every Monday morning at 8 a.m. to pray for each other, for our customers, for the self-storage facilities. You know, today I couldn't imagine running the facilities without him. The kingdom needs this next generation of Christian business leaders who have a vision and a heart for marketplace ministry. So that's a little challenge thrown out to you is think about mentoring that next generation and helping them see not only business, but what it means to be a Christian in the marketplace and being transformational. So a couple of things I want to leave with you. Anointed for Business. Get the book, read it if you haven't already. Okay. The other one is The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. Little skinny little book, easy read. I read this every year between Christmas and New Year's. When God gives you wealth, you got a big responsibility. What do you say about the rich man getting through into heaven? So it's easier to get through the eye of a needle. And so when God allows us to steward resources and growing over the years, you know, it's a dangerous little thing. We can get a little puffed up. We can get materialism. What about wealth? Do you pass it on to the next generation? Is that going to help your next generation? And so a lot of good stuff in here. It helps me stay centered when it comes to wealth and dealing with that and keeping the perspective on that. Another thing, the Willow Creek Leadership Summit. Have any of you attended the Willow Creek Leadership Summit? Way to go, yes. Okay. I've been going there every year for 10 years. It fills my tank. It's not just for church leaders. I just find the cross between church and business there's so much that goes both ways. And so it's a great conference to go to. It fills your tank and inspires and challenges you in business. They bring in business leaders to speak at these things, top-notch business leaders. So I want to encourage you to do that. Other thing, daily time with God. Get up 30 minutes early in the morning, earlier in the morning, if you don't already. Grab a coffee and read and get into your office and read, or in a quiet place and read a chapter and really soak up the Word. I've been doing that for quite a long time, and it's just a habit. Every weekday morning, down Tim Hortons, over to the office. Before the day gets busy, spend some time with God. Another thing, that's my reminder that my 27 minutes is up here. Not doing too bad right at the end here. Another thing, I'll put my email up here, and you can email me for this stuff. You don't have to write it down. Got into this thing about 10 years ago called LTG, Life Transformation Groups. And you get together with one or two other people once a week. And there's accountability questions you ask each other. And you both read through kind of the same chapters of the Bible together. And then you ask each other, what did you learn from God's Word this week? What's God telling you through His Word this week? So you're reading more intentionally. That it's like, hey, I'm going to have to talk to this other person or these other two people and say, oh yeah, when I was reading here and here, this verse really stood out and this meant something to me and here's what it meant. And you learn so much from each other. And I would say most of my spiritual growth has been through LTG, through that daily time with God, with prayer, with reading and prayer, and then getting together for this accountability. Also, accountability is real good too. I mean, we ask each other, have you, been, looked at any luring materials or sexual materials, or had any thoughts that you shouldn't have every week? And so anyway, those are just a couple of just little side notes at the end there. Just wanted to punch across to you. So email me if you have any questions. If you want to meet over coffee and talk about marketplace ministry, transforming the marketplace where God has placed you, or anything else that's related to what I've spoken to, by all means. I take the invitation up here because I'm hoping to inspire other Christian leaders to pray and see God's work and seeing opportunities to be able to use what we've been given as business people to be able to help advance the kingdom in the communities where we serve and the spheres of influence where God places us. So, thank you very much.
You can tell when a speaker is used to speaking, they hold the mic right, and I don't, so bear with me. I'll try to keep it in front of my mouth. Each time we have a speaker, Doug, we have a little plaque. And, this particular one is kind of appropriate. This has been our theme this year. I'm only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do, and what I ought to do by God's grace, I will do. And obviously that's where you're at. And so I really appreciate it. I know that Doug would probably not be a big promoter of wanting to promote it, but I do. So you have to bear with me. I have 2 of these books here, free. Anyone that promises to read it and then pass it on to somebody else. You guys know this is one of my favorite books too. Second to the Bible. This is the one that's transformed my life the most in the last 12 years. So come and see me after. Next month, our speaker is Janice Baird, who's the office manager at Life 100. I hesitate to say this because it's probably her strongest point. She is the wife of Scott Jackson. So you've got to come and hear that story by itself. That's our speaker in May, and we're very thankful that Janice has volunteered to tell our story, which is a great story. So again, thank you for being here today. If you are willing to be a sponsor, see me afterwards. If you don't have your name on our reminder list, get me a card afterwards. If you haven't paid yet, please do. And if you are interested in what you've seen today and want to know more about marketplace transformation, I encourage you to contact Doug or myself or anybody that you are sitting next to that's got a passion for sharing Christ, because the world can be a better place than it is right now, right here in Barrie. If these people know the love and the beauty and the hope of Christ. What the world lacks right now, without Christ, is hope. I've never seen a time in my life that has such hopelessness in the news every day. But we've got the hope. Let's get it out there. So thanks again for coming. Doug, thank you again for being here. And God bless you guys. If you have any questions at all, see me after. 2 books here. I have more at home, so don't feel bad if you come up with this. They're gone. Just let me know and I'll get you one. Okay, thanks again for being here. God bless you guys. Take care.